Mert Witness 1, and welcome to Monday Madness, version February 2021. And boy, it has been an interesting day today. Now, we have had both a hearing and an arrest. And these two incidences, believe it or not, are related to each other. So I'm going to start off first with the hearing. Because the hearing is actually more important than the arrest. And throughout this monologue, I'm going to explain why. Now, the hearing today in Douglas County, Colorado, essentially was a request by Cynthia Abzug to have her GPS monitor removed. The defense argued that Ms. Abzug had been a model citizen. She was in AA, regularly attending AA meetings. She was sponsoring 5 female AA members, so on and so forth. She was being a good egg. And if I remember correctly, she was also helping the homeless out and stuff like that. So she's being a good girl. You would think that would be enough, but no. The state got in there and said, now, just a doggone minute. Ms. Abzug has the addresses of the foster parents who has her child, the same child she is alleged to engage in a plot to kidnap. And the state argued that the foster parents do not feel safe with Cynthia Abzug wandering around without a GPS monitor. And in this brief back and forth, everybody got into a little discussion as to why she should or should not have the ankle bracelet removed. The court finally said, no, she is not going to get the ankle bracelet removed. She's going to keep it on. And after the court made the decision, the defense came back and said, is there a possibility that sometime down the road we could reconsider this? And I would like to bring this up in the next hearing. And the judge said, yes, we're going to have a hearing April 1st of all days, and we can figure it out then. And so there's going to be another hearing April 1st. Now, ordinarily, this would be the end of the monologue. I would say, okay, she went to court, asked for the GPS be removed, and the court said no. And so that was the end of that. But no, something else came out. And it made this brief little 11-minute hearing a whole hell of a lot more interesting. See, in the process of arguing with the court in regards to this GPS monitor, the defense brought up something else. And what the defense brought up was that there were 18 addresses obtained through trap and trace by law enforcement when they were searching for Ms. Abzug. And this point is interesting for this reason. Now, anybody that knows anything about how law enforcement works would understand what a trap and trace is. I actually have done at least one video on this very subject. You know, tap and trace has to do with the interception of cell phone pings as well as telephone conversations in order to obtain information that may be used in a law enforcement case. In this case, trying to figure out where the hell Cynthia Abzug is and what the hell she's up to. And what is significant is that they have 18 addresses. That means places where Cynthia Abzug was at for more than a brief period of time. When you do a trap and trace, it's a little bit different than pinging a cell phone, because you're actually tapping a phone. It's known as wiretap. You have to have a court order to do this sort of thing, because you are eavesdropping on conversations between residents of the United States. This isn't like you're going after a Russian spy or something. You are actually spying on American citizens, and you have to have a pretty clear reason for doing so. And tap and trace is usually done by federal authorities, since this involves crossing state lines. Now, how is this so important? Well, it's important because of this. From the time Mrs. Abzug decided that she didn't feel like showing up for court, and to the time she was apprehended, they knew where she was at all times. They could have arrested Cynthia Abzug within a couple days, but they chose not to. Instead, they were following her electronically as she went from one place to another, to another, to another. She started out in Colorado. At one point, she wound up in the state of Wisconsin. There is talk that she even wound up in the state of Minnesota. From Wisconsin, she found herself down to the state of Florida, through the state of Georgia, and then back up through Arkansas and other locations as she worked her way up to her final apprehension point within a very short distance of the Canadian United States border. So one can draw from all this that Cynthia Abzug intended on going into Canada. And law enforcement probably decided, well, enough of this. Let's just go ahead and arrest her now before she goes to Canada. I think we got all the information we need, so they arrested her in Montana before she had a chance to go into Canada. Look it up on the map of where she was apprehended and held by the sheriff's department, and look how close it is to Canada, and the fact that she was going north when she was apprehended. Now, it is abundantly clear that what was going on here is that law enforcement was doing a little evidence gathering. They were gathering evidence that could be used to charge other people in criminal actions. And who are these people that can potentially be charged with criminal acts such as aiding and abetting a fugitive from justice, or aiding and abetting in a kidnapping, or providing a firearm with the knowledge that it was going to be used in the commission of a felony? All sorts of interesting little charges that can be thrown around in this case came out, or will come out, in this investigation. Because there are articles. The Daily Beast had an article detailing Mrs. Abzug's exploits. The Daily Beast explained how a whole bunch of people were connected to this particular incident. And now we know that because there are 18 track and trace locations, addresses, not just locations, but addresses, physical addresses, that law enforcement is not done with this investigation. Cynthia Abzug isn't the only one they're keeping an eye on. There's all these other locations that are being drawn into this. Residences, people that have houses, places of business, hotels, all sorts of places. And what's going to happen is, during the trial, this is all going to come out. That this was just more than a desperate mother going to snatch her child back from the so-called evil CPS. This is part of a well-coordinated plan between a number of individuals, in other words, a conspiracy, to kidnap this child. It was not just Miss Abzug, it was all these other people. And I can guarantee you that to save her own ass, or to at least mitigate her problems, that Ms. Abzug is going to sing like a canary and implicate all these other people behind all these 18 addresses that came about in this tap and trace. You know, everybody said, throw away your cell phone, do that, do that. Apparently that stunt didn't work because they didn't use pinging. See, there's a difference between a ping and a tap and trace. With a ping, if you know the cell phone number, you can basically sit there and just watch the car move along. I mean, look at what happened with the insurrection over at the Capitol on the 6th of January. Somebody leaked the software used to ping out all these cell phones, and it was basically like watching a swarm of bees go from one end of Washington to the other. You know, little green dots goes boom, boom. Fireflies or bees, whatever you want to use as a metaphor. There they go, in a big rush to the Capitol, and they swarm there. And those people are going to wind up paying the price of having their cell phone in their pocket during that little stunt. There's already been several hundred arrests, and there's likely going to be several thousand by the time the dust settles on this mess. But the Abzug situation is a little bit different. They use the tap and trace method. This is a method that's been used by law enforcement since almost the day the telephone was invented. Because not only are they using telephones to locate Cynthia Abzug, they're also listening in to see what everybody's talking about. And that stuff's all recorded. And all that stuff is going to be eventually in the hands of the court. Now, what's interesting about all this is the prosecution has not turned this information over to the defense. And that's what made this little hearing today so important. Because you found out, number one, that there are 18 trap and trace addresses submitted by law enforcement to the prosecution. But the prosecution, as of yet, has not turned this information over to the defense. So we got this little sidebar here. Now, ordinarily, in a tap and trace, the information gets handed over as part of discovery to the defense, unless there is a compelling reason not to. There's an exception to every rule, apparently, and this happens to be one of them. So the prosecution is likely to have told the court, look, we need to keep these addresses confidential for the time being. And the reason for that is quite simple, because this is an ongoing investigation. The case has not concluded. The case is not closed. The investigation has not stopped. And the main reason is because the prosecution may indict other co-conspirators and press charges against them in regards to this incident. And because of that, these people need to start worrying, because it is significant to the nth degree that those addresses are being withheld from the court for the time being. They don't want the defense to have this information. I'm going to make a slight correction. The court does have the addresses. They have just chosen, along with the prosecution, not to release them, because there's a specific request by law enforcement, and this includes the FBI, not to release those addresses to the defense quite yet. The defense will eventually get the addresses. That's, part of the law. But they don't need to get them right now. And law enforcement does have the right to request the withholding of those addresses because of a continuing investigation. And that's apparently what's going on. Now to part 2 of this little adventure. Long time ago, in an internet far, far away, we had an individual known as Agent Margaritaville. And Agent Margaritaville is almost as much of a character as was Phil McConnell. In fact, these two have known each other from way back when. They were best buddies, so to speak. They were on the same wavelength with this conspiracy theory nonsense that these two individuals engaged in. And they also have something else in common, and that is something known as the Children's Crusade. For Agent Margaritaville claims to have been the one that come up with this bright idea, and the one that started it, and the one that used to call it the Children's Crusade. And that Phil McConnell appropriated the whole thing. The Children's Crusade and the platform of how you use it to rescue children and take donations in order to advocate the rescue of children, so on and so forth. This was all Agent Margaritaville's bright idea, and Phil McConnell appropriated it. Now, apparently, Agent Margaritaville didn't hold a grudge. He simply went and started his own version of the Children's Crusade. Used almost the same shield design and business plans, but it was the Canadian version of the Children's Crusade. And they continued on their own separate ways, and Agent Margaritaville supported Phil McConnell to some degree, even though he probably had a little bit of a grudge over having this idea of his appropriated. But it didn't seem to bother him all that much, because he had his own agenda to deal with. And Agent Margaritaville became something of a burr up their ass to the Canadian authorities. And he finally was charged with stalking, harassment, or the Canadian version of it. And, like all people like him, he decided to go on the lam. Became a fugitive from justice. Well, he managed to get his ass arrested. And it splattered all over Toronto newspaper that they finally got this little pest. And he's going to go on trial, and he's going to go to court. And I don't know how the Canadian legal system works. I haven't studied it all that much. I do know from past experience that they don't mess around. And then he's probably going to be doing some time. His ass is going to be sitting in jail right now until he goes through their system. So we'll see how that one turns out. But this is an interesting thing about Agent Margaritaville. Shortly after Phil McConnell was arrested and was still in Wisconsin, Agent Margaritaville got right in the middle of this situation, trying to get Phil McConnell out of this mess. He actually contacted Denise McConnell and the attorney for Phil McConnell to try and see if something could be done about getting him out of his mess. And this meant going against the individual that got him in this mess in the first place, Timmy Hoffa. Now, Agent Margaritaville didn't get anywhere. His efforts were rebuffed. He didn't know what the hell he was doing, number one, so that whole effort fell flat on the face, and he was also busy running from the law. Now, it's interesting to note just how long Agent Margaritaville managed to stay out of jail. Quite a long time, actually. Almost a year, if not more than a year. And apparently he wasn't very careful about it. But eventually, he got his ass arrested. And so this just goes to show that you can sit there and you can run around and be a fugitive from justice, but at some point, when the law enforcement feels like doing so, you are going to get your ass arrested. Especially if you hang around in the state that issued the arrest warrant. All right, now, there is someone who, if he is still alive, which I really doubt, is a fugitive of justice on a misdemeanor fugitive warrant. That basically means that if he stays out of the state of Minnesota, he ain't going to get arrested. And if he is in the state of Minnesota, he's in danger of getting arrested. Now, here's the clincher. Remember, I mentioned that there were 18 addresses in the Edsel case that had tap and trace. Now, guess what one of those addresses is? One of those addresses is likely the person that, for some period of time, was harboring Timmy Hoffa, the fugitive from justice. Because that address is within the state of Minnesota. And the other important address that may have been involved in the tap and trace is in the tiny little town of Plum City, and a house surrounded by corn. In a little downtown location in Plum City that used to be a bank, and was for a period of time a broadcasting studio. These addresses that are being withheld from the defense right now, because this is probably an ongoing investigation. Now, the one thing that Timmy Hoffa and his associates need to worry about is what happens if this misdemeanor warrant suddenly turns into a felony warrant. Then a whole lot of things start to kick in. Because with these outstanding tap and trace addresses, combined with a felony warrant as a fugitive from justice, there could be other criminal charges filed. Again, for aiding and abetting a fugitive from justice, aiding and abetting in an attempted kidnapping, aiding and abetting and God knows what. So this little 11-minute hearing that was held today may have just unlocked a lot of secrets, and that a floodgate of secrets being revealed is about to begin. Please like, subscribe, share, hit the notification button, and stay tuned because things are just starting to warm up. This is William K. Murtaugh, Mert Witness 1. Have a good one.